right of the people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
It takes the willingness to stand by and do what has to be done when it has to be done.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Off The Shelf Bookclub. My name is Jermaine.
My name is Jessalin.
And we're excited to get into part 5 of We Do This Till We Free Us. We are really excited to get into this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below, share to others. We want to spread the knowledge because we all do need to do the knowledge. So before we get into talking about part 5, which is we must practice and experiment abolitionist organizing in theory, we're going to get into our land acknowledgement. The Off The Shelf Book Club wants to offer our utmost respect to those who came before us on this land. It is important that we protect and acknowledge the history of the indigenous people of America. Minnesota Makoche, which means the land of the water that reflects the sky, is the homeland of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. Minnesota in its history has been involved in the genocide of Native people and multiple treaties that have stripped them of their homeland. Where Off The Shelf Book Club resides is the home of the Mdewakanton people, which means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Off The Shelf Book Club will do whatever we can to honor the Native people and their land and do what we can to aid in the land back movement. All right. Again, thank you for tuning in today. We are going to, before we start discussing the questions, we're going to go over the questions that we have for you. So the first one is, how do we change our behavior and attitude with words helping us with the movement?
What does collective responsibility look like?
What could caring for criminalized individuals look like?
And how has feminism played a part in dismantling and upholding violent systems?
All right. So what were your first thoughts about this part?
I thought I like this part. I think it was very I would say feminist forward. The vast majority of it, which I liked. I don't think there's anything, wrong with that. I was just, I think that that's the thing that stood out.
For sure. I think that, along with just, the feminist point of view on abolition, I think, obviously abolition, I think, carries a lot of feminist values. But a key thing I thought that was talked about also in here was, language and how we speak upon whether it's policies or if it's just kind of within yourself or on media. I thought it was really helpful because I wasn't able to think I never considered some of those things.
Yeah.
And how you're talking about it. So yeah. So I guess we could get into the first question. I feel like we're rolling real good today. Might as well not stop it. How do we change our behavior and attitude with words, helping us with the movement? That was a weird comma.
Yeah, I got this, from the first page in the section. She talks about her time as she's protesting, doing things like this. And she says at the end of the page, she says, as I listened, I was struck again by the importance of language and of words that need to be spoken. Our best teachers, including Audre Lorde, among others, have imparted this truth. In the last few months, weeks, and days, I have found myself saying Black Lives Matter out loud at various times. It's not that I don't already know that they do. I think that what I'm trying or that I'm trying to speak words into existence, and these words should be taken for granted. They're not. You know, she talks about before how she believed that words should remain unspoken. Who are they trying to convince? And like in here, right, she's talking about, well, that's not actually true.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that there's a conversation that sometimes is had about like saying these things aren't going to do anything.
Yeah. Mhm.
But that's not necessarily true. And I think that like this also gets into like a spiritual realm or like religious realm about like manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe in manifestation, and even like in the right like religious counterpart, like a prayer, right, like these are like the same things, right? You speak them out loud. The reason why you speak them out loud and the way that you speak them is what helps with manifesting and making it come to life. And so if like you're somebody really spiritual, like thinking about it in that way, or even somebody who's trying to be more spiritual, right? These are things that you can do, right? Black Lives Matter is like a
Affirmation.
yeah, like almost like an affirmation. Like it's not passive, right? And important in like how you manifest things is like how you say them. So, you know, you're not saying, well, I really want this. I have this. This is something that I already have. I'm grateful for this, even if it's not in your hands specifically quite yet. But part of that is like you visualizing that it's already here helps those things come true. And
Absolutely.
saying Black Lives Matter is saying that they do matter, which we know that they do, for example, right? Not I want them to matter, right? They do matter. It helps that space of manifestation.
I agree, because like and it's also like sometimes when you say things like that, it kind of reminds me of in Memphis the Martin Luther King march about, I think it was a union march, and it was the I Am a Man. And it's like, well, if you're like Martin Luther King, you look at him and you'd say like, oh yeah, well you're a man, but like, why are you saying I am a man? And it's a good reminder. It's like just reminding you that I am like Black Lives Matter, because way too often they're treated like they don't.
Right.
And I think to a person who doesn't that is privileged enough to not have to think about things like that, getting reminded that these realities exist through these types of sayings are important too, because a white person isn't going to be thinking, the average white person isn't thinking about how black people, like the fear that black people face in everyday life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when we sit here and say these things and create these slogans, it's important that we are saying, like, sometimes it is like the cliches, because there's a reason why it's a cliche, because it's true.
Right.
And I think that it's just important. Like me, I would not necessarily be able to understand the full perspective of somebody in the LGBTQ, wherever on that spectrum, right? So when you create these type of slogans, that could give me another perspective of being like, oh, I never even thought about like the dangers of that, or having to go through that every day, or say her name, or the Me Too and stuff like that. You just, I think it's really important, even though some people use it as just kind of a easy layup. I think that there is still like really good importance in that, because even if you're not looking at it in the spiritual way of manifestation, it is still following up with just affirming that.
Yeah. I think a big part too is what you say with intention. What intention do you have while saying it is a big part too, right? And I think maybe that's where the conversation needs to be had. Like, don't say this if you don't actually have the intention of meaning it.
Right.
Mean what you say. Right? And so if you're just saying it just because it looks good, then that doesn't do anything. That's not saying things with good intentions.
Agreed.
And I think that's where like the conversation should be, not saying these words are meaningless.
Exactly. Because, and I do think that she mentions it, I think, later on in the chapter, but like she pretty much said like the organizers don't live by the win and lose. You know, your gun, like majority of organizing is losing, and I think that it is important to hold on to a lot of the little steps that we do take, because those are any win. I think is, well, I won't say any win is always a good win, because there's can be downfalls to it, but I think that it is just good that we take these steps. Even if some people aren't taking it as serious, if we are putting it in front of more eyes, it's more chances for more people that will take that serious to see it. You know what I mean? And it's just spreading the word too. And eventually, I think that a lot of people end up kind of retrospectively going back and being like, oh yeah, okay, I see what they're saying now. Like, we can sit here and say majority of people disagree with what we knew as slavery back in the 1800s, 1700s, for those 400 years, right? We can sit here and agree that that is bad now, but we also had to go through a bunch of fighting for that in the small steps.
Right.
And we can all sit here and agree today. And I think it's just normalizing.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I felt like I ranted a little bit there.
No, you're good.
I also want to talk about with this specific question. I think another important thing when we talk about like words, attitude, and language, when it comes with the movement, it's important to use the words. Like, we have to say it as straight up as we can, because on like 106, page 106, the second paragraph in, she says, it's hard to look at torture. We want to avert our gaze. We want to keep it abstract and to speak euphemistically. But we must squarely face torture. We must see it. This is the only way that we'll have any chance of addressing the violence done in our names at home and abroad. And so I just think that it's important that we talk about these things. Like, we have to say what these things were. Like, there's no, like, because, like, I think that even nowadays, like, we've become more desensitized to, like, the term police brutality. We need to say what these fucking pigs are actually doing to these people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, George Floyd wasn't just an example of just regular police brutality. That man was choked to death.
Yeah.
And was jumped and was attacked by a mob of police. Like, when we use these type of terms, when you talk about Breonna Taylor, she was sleeping and she was shot point blank we have to use these real, like, if we choose to use these quick phrases for like these deaths and the seriousness behind situations, we are not doing it justice. We have to like say what it is.
Yeah.
It's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when we live in that reality, it's easier to move forward taking the right steps. You know? Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add on with that?
No.
I do. Still have more. Sorry.
Okay.
But, and just continuing on to that, it's like how recently there's been a lot of lynchings lately. And that's the word that we have to use, because that's what it is. Black people don't hang themselves from trees. And that's point blank, period.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about lynchings, we're talking about murders, hate crimes, evil shit. This is what we're talking about. And again, black people do not hang themselves from trees. So stop calling it suicides.
Yeah.
And how are you ruling this when you've barely done a fucking investigation? There's so many different examples that we could go over of the language not being appropriate for the actual seriousness of the situation. But we have to, as a people, start demanding of that and start doing it ourselves. Just like in the it was a women's movement in this 1975 that was, it was like the first woman to ever like get found not guilty or plea or win over self-defense. But I can remember the saying. Okay, so I found the saying. So on page 114, when Joan Little, she killed a officer. I think it was a CO who was trying to rape her. Here, I found it. So, a 20-year-old black woman prisoner was defending herself against Clarence Allgood, a white guard who was sexually assaulting her. Joan Little grabbed an ice pick from his hand and stabbed him. Allgood died and Little escaped, eventually turning herself into authorities. A week later, in claiming self-defense, she was charged with first-degree murder, which carried a possibility of the death penalty. Her plight soon inspired a mass defense campaign that became known as Free Joan Little movement. Organizations and individuals across the country raised money for her bond and her defense. And outside of the outside of the city hall and where the court was taking place, the chants were from the crowd were 1, 2, 3, Joan must be free. 4, 5, 6, power to the ice pick. And that's the language again that we have to continue to use, is like talking about these things as they are. That's all it takes. We have to start, it's normalizing that language too. Normalizing the fact that we have to start saying this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Getting used to saying that and not being normalized with the fact that there is so much black death, but we have to normalize talking about it and being upfront with it and fighting forward and pushing forward with this shit. There's no more beating around the bush. The only reason that the lynchings and fucking Gary, Indiana, and probably like this Nolan Wells case, and all this other shit is like popping off right now is because word of mouth from black people, from them either posting online or going out in the streets, grassroots organizations. These are the people who are bringing media light to these situations and speaking truth in these situations. And that's what we must do. Talk about them because they are real.
Yeah.
I'll be done. So getting into this next question though, what does collective responsibility look like?
Yeah, I got this from a couple places, in the book. Going back to like where paragraph that you said or that you kind of already mentioned. And I think like a big part of this is like she talks about what collective responsibility looks like amongst each other in our society and our communities. And so on page 106, there's two places there. But we must squarely face torture. We must see it. This is the only way that we have any chance to addressing the violence done in our names, at home and abroad. It is abhorrent. We cannot allow ourselves to be complacent. We mustn't continue to tolerate the intolerable. To do so is to forfeit the right to consider oneself to be a moral being. And then later at the bottom, I do know, however, that love offers the opportunity to build sustaining and affirming communities that can help buffer against the relentless forces of oppression seeking our daily destruction. And later on page 109, at the very end of this chapter, she says, we resisted the violence of fading memories and fought to preserve the knowledge of atrocities in which we all bear some responsibility. We struggled with survivors of torture, and yesterday we won, as she's talking about
Chicago's torture ring that they had going.
With the Chicago police and stuff like that we're doing. And I think multiple things stand out in terms of what we should do as a collective, what our responsibility is, and that is to bear witness to things that are happening, but not in a way that desensitizes you, because a lot of things happen all the time, all at once. And I know some people can face, or most people face, desensitization to it. But when we're watching these things, we should be upset about it. And watching them with that determination. And so bearing witness in that. But also, I think another one is, right, that she talks about is love, right? Loving one another and each other, building that community that even helps make, right, bearing the witness to it and being upset about things that are happening easier, right? Because no matter how many times you see like someone that you love get hurt, right, over and over and over again, it doesn't matter how many times you've seen it, you're still gonna be upset about it. And so like that's the same thing that we need to give ourselves, right, as community. And in that last thing, when we look at page 109, when she talks about we resisted the violence of fading memories and fought to preserve the knowledge of atrocities for which we all bear some responsibility. I think that a big piece of that, right, is not only bearing witness, but ensuring that the things that have happened, right, continue, right, to be shared. Like we do, like for example, we do a good job at remembering 9/11, right, an atrocity that happened that should have never happened. And the reason why we do that is to ensure that it never happens again. Right? And so we should be doing the same things for stuff. Like, for example, slavery. Like, if we really talk about it, the reality is our prison system and our police and all of those things would not exist because we did exactly what we would have done, right, if it were held to the same standard as 9/11.
Shit, even if we taught as much about it too. We would be able to see more of the reflections of it in jail and work and just like the average like work environment, you know, and,
Yeah.
corporate America and
Right.
shit like that. It's like we would be able, if we were taught more about it, more people would see like the hypocrisy, and it makes sense why. I guess you know the United States doesn't want to learn about it because then the machine starts to change its way of functioning.
Right. I would say the Holocaust, but given where we are in today's day and age, we
Yeah.
don't actually look at it as closely as I thought we might have.
Well, it's because we also got to think of like the perspective that we taught and we are taught.
Yeah.
Because we're still taught a perspective of like slavery, and we are taught way more about the Holocaust than what you know. We're taught way more about the Holocaust than slavery, but there still is like things that we omit from there, like the fact that we didn't join the war because of the moral high ground of being like what is happening to Jewish people all across the world is bad. It's because we started which it's because Japan bombed us even though we had an oil blockade. Well, they bombed us for I don't know why. I'll take back those air quotes. They bombed us in Hawaii. I can't remember what it's called right now.
Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor, duh. Yeah, I was blanking on it. But the only reason they bombed us was because of the oil blockade that we set on them. And that's how when we omit those certain things, it really just like changes the perspective on how we teach it too.
Yeah.
And so then we can never, but the way we've taught it, we would never be that on the side of genocide, you know?
Yeah. I guess I just say it in the sense of like because they teach it like that, you would think
Right?
that we would have learned to not do it, and yet that's just not the case.
Yeah. And I agree. Yeah. Because like the mass killing of anybody should be like turned off by.
Because like I feel like we don't teach never to do slavery again. We just say it happened and it produced all of these great things for America, and then we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Which does not tell you not to do it again.
Right.
If anything, it tells you to find another way.
Yeah. Agreed. That's a good fucking point. That's good. That was a good point. I think, do you have anything else that you were gonna expound on? Sorry.
No.
Kind of continuing off of collective responsibility and what does it look like? I think there's multiple points and examples in this part of the book, but my favorite part was the one where I want to say it was the Free Rakaya movement. Was her name Rakaya? I can't remember. Sorry. It was I don't know. I'm sorry. But like the Free Rakaya movement, I think that's what her name was. No, it wasn't. No, it was not Free Rakaya. I'm mixing things up. I apologize. Okay. But it reminds me about the situation of Free Brescia and Free Marissa. Two women who were charged with not murder, but charged with crimes, even though they were clearly in like self-defense, right? And we sat here, and there were people who decided to come out for these people.
Yeah.
For this case, and when we sit here and we come out as a collective, as a community, and stand up against these things, they will start to fold, because they also know that everybody understands math, and if there's all of us out here that are believing and are willing to go and fight, out here and yell and demand change for these people, there's only more to come if they don't start answering to these actions. And we're the ones who dictate that. So it's up to us to start going out here and holding them more accountable. That's part of the collective responsibility, is that we come out, and when one of our community members are kidnapped off the streets, we go out, we protest, we go let them know that we are not okay with what they are doing to us. When someone is killed by the state, when in any sort of violence towards the people, we will go out here and fight back. And that's what we have to just show them. And eventually they'll get it. It'll get through their head eventually that we're not just going to fold. But the reason why we haven't continued to see progress, and sometimes it seems like we're taking steps backwards, is because there isn't like a persistent majority outcry about situations. When there's been George Floyd's, there's probably been hundreds of George Floyd's since him. There's been hundreds of fucking Breonna Taylors. The police have not stopped killing people. Not just the police, just overall the state. Whether that's CEOs, ICE agents, FBI, I don't care. All of them still have blood on their hands, and we have to go and make sure that they are getting held accountable. Point blank, period. And we shouldn't be just going out here for men, because Kaba brought up a good point of, we see that a lot of these protests and movements are happening because of the victims are men. A lot of the times that's what it is. And we need to get out in the streets for everybody.
Right.
For everybody. Doesn't matter about their gender. Doesn't matter about their sexual orientation. It doesn't matter about their ethnicity. It doesn't matter about their race or whatever. All that matters is that the state killed the people. They're killing the people. And that's where our strength is. And we got to stay out there, and we got to stay committed and persistent and consistent and letting them know.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to this third question. What could caring for criminalized individuals look like?
Yeah. So I got this from page 111. And you know, she says a quote, "It's really like short and sweet. Care is the antidote to violence." And when we look at that, right, a lot of times, right, we look at victims, and we should, and there's questions about that later, right? But like, we should look at what care looks like for victims. But like we've talked about before too, these systems are violent to those who criminalize. It doesn't make sense, right, to send, or if someone were to rape someone, to send them to a rape factory.
Right.
And so because of that, we also have to look at, what does caring for those who have done harm look like? How would we care for them as well? Because there are people that are going to have to come up and step up and do those things, because it shouldn't be on the victim to do that kind of care, because they also need care themselves.
Right.
And so it takes all of us around to do that individual care and work with everybody to push those things.
100%.
And-
Sorry.
And so she says, like, later, like, right, at the end, a practice of abolitionist care underscores that our fates are intertwined and our liberation is interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to think on that level of stuff when we talk about this.
Agreed. I think that also when we're, talking about this, I think it's also important that we're not throwing people under the bus, because at the end of the day, these crimes definitely aren't defining of people. People do have, I believe in giving people chances, because that's the important, that's the, I think a really big important part is that we have, we're open-minded to chances, because I think about it a lot of times where I'm 23 years old currently, and there were things that I did when I was 18, 19, 20, where I wouldn't want to be held to those, wouldn't want to be facing that same consequence today, for my actions then, because I'm a damn near completely different person.
Right.
And it's just not, I think we have to continue to like look at people who are criminalized as somebody that you can know, or you yourself. I think we have to overall just decriminalize people in our heads.
Yeah.
Take that cop up out of our head,
Yeah.
and look at people with a heart.
Right. And I think, like, right, you got to reiterate this every time. Providing care for somebody, removing that harsh and violent system does not just relieve them of accountability. Does not relieve them of having to do certain things to, get back to a better place in society, to, care for others and those that they've harmed, and do all those things, right? Change, learn, grow. It's just we're doing a different way. It's a different way of doing that, because the system that's supposed to do that, because the idea is that you go to jail, prison, do, whatever, come back and not do those things again. But that doesn't work. We need to find a different way.
Right. And like we should, instead of making people in prison almost get like, I hate to say it like this, but like due to environments, they almost become less civilized, and then you want to put them back out into regular society for them to not commit a crime. We should actually be working on from where they are when they committed this crime, work on them on getting them back into society. That should be the main goal.
Yeah.
And ensuring that their needs are met. Because at the end of the day, I think I've said it so many damn times on this podcast, majority of reasons, like, there's a reason why somebody committed a crime. Most people wouldn't be just doing this shit for the fun of it. There are things that are in their life that have happened, are currently happening, that has led them to this moment. And it's not just some people are born bad. That's the easy way out to think.
Right.
And just giving people, like, again, what could caring for criminalized individuals look like is really looking in the mirror. Because you're only a one bad day, one mistake from being criminalized yourself.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to add on to that?
No.
Cool. All right. So this last question that we're going to be going over is, How has feminism played a part in dismantling and upholding violent systems?
Yeah. I got this from a um, quote that she says, and it's, "My feminism does not drive me into the arms of the state, but even further from it." And, you know, I have us looking at both sides for a specific purpose. There are different kinds of feminism, right? There's not one kind. There are different kinds that focus on different things. And I think we also know, right, that there are ways at looking at feminism that does not line up with abolition, or does not really even line up with creating equity and equality when we really look at it from the things. Like, I think when we look at pop culture feminism, I think you could say that it has its, like, it gets you interested. Okay, I'm interested in this. Like, yeah, women should get equal pay. Women should do this, etc. But pop culture feminism just upholds capitalist societies, and in ways can also uphold patriarchy, because there's and racism, because they're intertwined.
Yeah.
And so when we do feminism like that, that does those things, that upholds violent systems. Those are violent systems in place, and we can't do that. And I think the reality should be, in my personal opinion, all feminism, or true feminism, would push you further away from the state and not towards it. And I think a good example of this is, she talks about on page 12,
112.
or 112, sorry, Brescia Meadows. And so Brescia Meadows was 14 years old last July when she allegedly used the gun that her father had brandished for years against her and her family, terrorizing them and abusing them, to shoot him in his sleep. Brescia had learned to fear her father, who had repeatedly made threats to kill her and her family. The evidence of her father's abuse could be seen in police reports, orders of protection, faded bruises, stories from neighbors, cries for help to school counselors, and rumors of sexual violence. On more than one occasion, Brescia escaped. Each time she was returned to her abusive home. The last time she ran to her aunt's home, her aunt was a police officer. But she could not protect her niece. Instead, Brescia was charged with aggravated murder. The state didn't protect her, and now she enters her 10th month in jail. Brescia has repeatedly been placed under suicide watch and is facing trial. The state of Ohio is now her abuser. She literally went to somebody who was supposed to help her and to protect her. And what happened was quite literally the opposite.
Yep.
And so at what point is when our states and governments, because regardless of how you feel, even in pop culture feminism, we acknowledge the fact that our governments constantly lets us down, right? Why do we not go to the police when we are raped? Because they won't fucking do anything. Why do we, not tell anybody about our abuse? Because nobody will fucking do anything. The people in power are abusers. We can all acknowledge that, no matter what kind of feminism you are into. So then the question is, right, if we don't like abusers, then why haven't we put down the biggest one yet? The one who's doing some real damage? Because you don't get your healing in proper justice because of the things that happen to you. And in some cases, it just harms us even more.
Yep.
So I think that that's more like internally, like as a woman or as somebody who is like falls into the feminist category, regardless of your how you view yourself, right? Why would you push for
More.
justice from the government if it's never done us any good?
Right. Agreed. I think that in a way, the certain feminists who believe in like the more policing, um, think that that is upholding the violent systems, because at the end of the day, like, a lot of these cops are doing a lot of raping and sexual assaulting a bunch of people, whether on both genders, but obviously women are impacted more by it. And also, they're the ones who aren't prosecuting and letting these motherfuckers get away with rape. And so we have to also look at it like from that perspective of like, are we aiding in the system? It's kind of like just how the abolitionist conversation in here with when it comes to policy. I think it's important. Like, are we aiding in the system that is actively hurting us, and that is police are actively hurting women. That's a fucking fact. Ask their wives. You know what I mean? It's not only the people that they deal with out on the streets, it's their family. So I think it's just important that we look at as when it comes to a lot of the issues that we believe need to be fixed, are we somehow aiding in that, policy? Are we overlooking some part because it's easier that way? She gave a list. Kaba gave a list in this chapter talking about like, how do we ensure that we're like pushing for abolitionist beliefs or policies. And I think it's important that we look at things like this and consider things like this, because the language behind things really is important. And it's important that we ensure that we're doing what we need to actually push abolition, instead of just like cherry picking this, or actually push feminism instead of just cherry picking issues. You know what I mean? Like, if women are getting paid at the same rate as men, we still have work to do if women are still getting raped at a super high rate like they are right now, or at any rate, to be honest. Like, we have to work on those things. So, yeah, you just can't cherry pick. And when we cherry pick issues, especially when it comes to like, oh, if you're going to be talking about transgender women and then you be sitting here and you exclude them, again, you're upholding these violent systems.
Yeah.
We need to be inclusive, period.
Right.
Kind of like the bottom-up theory.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think another thing too, right? An important reason why we have to dismantle it. Miriam Kaba and James Baldwin, I feel like, says it best on page 14. But we have to contend with the fact that the system will never indict itself, and that when we demand more prosecutions and punishment, this only serves to reinforce a system that must itself be dismantled. As Baldwin teaches us, The law is meant to be my servant and not my master, still less my torturer and my murderer. To respect the law in the context in which the American Negro finds himself is simply to surrender his self-respect.
I really like that. Thank you for bringing that quote up because we almost went by without talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what I was just saying. Of like, we can't sit here and say that we want to bring down the overall sexual assault rate in America and then invest in more policing,
Right?
Because that actively is not doing
Everything but that.
right. Exactly. We need to find different ways to do that, and how we like that may seem harder to make sure that your language is inclusive to everybody, but how we do that is by surrounding ourselves and organizing with all different types of people so we could get their perspective, and that we're not forgetting people, letting people fall to the wayside. Like we need to hear these perspectives,
Right.
Is there anything else that you want to add on to that?
No, I don't think so.
Anything else you want to say? I guess one thing I'll say, the first chapter of this part, police torture reparations, lessons in the struggle and justice from Chicago. I think it being about Chicago is kind of ironic too, but overall that chapter kind of reminded me of the song The Negro Problem from Chance the Rapper.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of talking about all these everyday issues that we see and or we're faced with, and we kind of just carry it. And another part later on in the part 5 was when Rakia, I think was that her name?
Yeah.
I keep on forgetting. The woman who was shot by the police. That's what happened to her. She was shot by the police, and the officer was not convicted, and the brother of hers said, "This motherfucker killed my sister, and y'all are just gonna let him walk." And it's the reality of the scars, and I say this word, kind of, I think that there's a better term for what I'm thinking of, but we carry these scars and these burdens and this grief and pain and fear, and we don't have a place for. We need to start using all that energy that is being pushed on us and push back with that energy and understand it. But we also need to listen to the stories and collectively stand up for one another,
Yeah.
Because my problem is your problem. Quote from the Negro Problem song. But yeah, I think go check that out. Got that record right here. Y'all could kind of see in the corner. Definitely check out that song. Check out the whole album. I think that it's very relevant to today, and I think this book too, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, thank you guys again for tuning in with us. We really appreciate it. If you've gotten this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know some of your answers. We really, really, really want to hear some of your answers. We're just kind of waiting. We want to hear some of your answers, what you're thinking about these questions. Is there something that we said that you want us to fix, you want us to educate us on, or you want to add on to? We want all of it. So, again, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hype the video, comment below. Ooh, I almost dropped it. Sorry about that. Comment below. Hit our DMs, emails, all that. We appreciate it. And we'll catch y'all next time.
Yeah.
Wish y'all nothing but great health and wealth, a peace of mind. Ashe.
Ashe.
I write it to people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.